Alright, now we have some interesting wireless earbuds today. These are the Tinbuds 3, which look a lot more like IEMs, but wireless. Let's talk about it. Alright, now disclaimer, this was sent out to me for review. In fact, I got two sent out for review in different colors, so we can look at both different colors. But matter of fact is, these were both sent to me for review, but this won't affect my review in any way, shape, or form. Everything you're going to hear here is going to be my own personal opinion. Also, this is going to be more of a gaming-focused review. Yeah, this is definitely more of an audiophile product, and I'll still touch on those audiophile aspects, but I'll explain how that will affect its performance in-game. So, with that being said, let's get started. Starting with the box, we got the bad English, which I'm always a big fan of because listening the world. Yeah. Anyway, removing the box cover, we have a pretty nice box with a fancy pad on it, and this box is actually kind of cloth-like, but we don't really care too much about that because what we really care about is what's inside the box, such as the earbuds in the charging case, some extra sets of ear tips, a short charging cable, and a little booklet. Now, I did get two colors, but they're essentially the same aside from the color, both being mostly made of metal, with their cylindrical design and little battery indicator in the front, USB-C charging in the back, and a plastic bottom with details. Now, upon opening the cases, we get the earbuds in two different flavors, green and black, and blue and more blue. Build-wise, it's quite excellent, as the earbuds are very much like custom molded IEMs. I mean, just look at the molded design, which is very reminiscent of custom IEMs, with the only difference being that there's no plug for a cable, but instead little metal contacts for charging. As for color, you just have seen the blue on blue, so here's the green version where it's green on the outside. Rather than being marbled like the outside, the inside is just pure black. The nozzles on both are exactly the same, being made of metal, with of course little metal grills to keep your earwax out. Now, for those of you who are curious about how the microphone sounds, this is essentially how it's going to sound, and it's basically passable. It'll get you going. It's not like the greatest mic in the world, and generally speaking, you're going to be using this for calls, and it's just okay for the most part. And while I'm at it, this is kind of how they look like on my head, they're just not too big, honestly, and they fit quite well in the ears due to their very nice ergonomic design. I don't think they're too large, but they do stick out a little bit more than your typical IEM because they had to fit, like, electronic and, a battery in there. But overall, they look pretty okay. They fit really well. They're really comfortable, and I can wear them for hours on end. Alright, now, like I said earlier, these guys were not made for gaming, but we're going to use them for gaming anyway. Just cuz, but first, let's get into, the basic features of them. These little guys run on Bluetooth 5.2, which is pretty good, and supposedly, I do believe they also run aptX if you have aptX, enabled devices, which will help with sound quality and even latency, which will help also in gaming in some, situations and whatnot. When it comes to battery life, it is very good. You get about 6.5 hours per bud, essentially, so a good 6.5 hour listening time total in one charge. And if you run on batteries with the look at the sheer mass of the size of the battery case, you get another 5 charges, and that's 5 times 6.5. I can't do math right now, so here's the total time you would get in terms of extra charges, and I guess plus the charge that you get on the earbuds themselves, and here's your total time because math. But as you can tell, this is a very large case because of that, and if I were to put it in my pocket, well, it's going to stick out because it's kind of big. So it's definitely more of one of those baggable kind of cases, not a very pocketable case. Now, when it comes to water resistance, I don't think these have any sort of IP ratings, but judging from the build, I think it's going to be okay for the most part, but I'd still be a little bit careful. I don't know if you can work out in them necessarily speaking, because they're more designed for everyday and just listening to music and stuff like that, but I feel like they'd be safe to work out on. Don't take my word for it. I'm not entirely sure on the whole sweat resistance, but I think they're going to be okay for the most part. But, once again, not 100% on that. Regarding, built-in feature sets, there isn't really much. They're pretty much bare bones, but they do the basics well enough. So you essentially get, touch controls, and I'm happy to say that these days with touch controls, on these guys, they're also pretty good. They're very responsive to, using touch, and you can essentially control, basically anything you need to from the earbuds themselves, from the volume, skipping tracks, going back to tracks, hanging up, calls, it's all there. But you do have to remember the touch combinations, how many times to tap, how long to hold. But once you get used to it, you get used to it. So there is that. There is no noise canceling, but due to the design of them, their noise isolation is really good. These things really do plug up your ears, and I think because of that, the volume that you get out of these is really good. But this also definitely has to do with the drivers. So these little guys get very loud. You don't really have to be at very high volume settings just to get a lot of sound out of these guys. I felt half, 50% volume was pretty loud on these guys, and because of that 6.5 battery life I mentioned earlier can be extended if you're using lower battery volumes. And considering how loud these guys are, you don't really have to have them super loud, and I can see these lasting a little bit longer than the described battery time. Very rarely do people sit in one place using earbuds for an entire 6 hours, though I guess it does make sense if you're going to be using them as a little single earbud calling device type of thing, which I should then mention it can do the single bud usage where you have one in in your ear and one back in the case to charge, and when one runs out, you can swap them out. Just, do mind that both of them will still be active when you take them out of your ears. They don't have the auto detection for like knowing when you've taken them out of your ears. It's purely manual. So to do so, you essentially take one out, put it back in the case, and you have to make sure the case is closed for it to deactivate the one that is going to be charging to get it, started to charge, and, for you to use this singularly. If this is even slightly agape, they will connect with each other, and they'll play from both while, I guess, charging at the same time. But for the most part, you want to make sure the case is closed to make sure it's charging and deactivated, so it only uses one. And when you're done, you can swap them out, and then same thing, close it up, use the other one. Now, this does bring one major downside I do have to this, and it's that the case is not exactly the tightest. I wish the case had a stronger magnet to stay closed better, because any little push to have it open will essentially activate and power on the earbuds, and they will automatically pair to whatever last device they essentially paired to. So if it's in your bag and it just happens to just kind of get hit like that and just barely open in your bag, it'll connect to your phone or connect to whatever device you have, it connected to previously, which can be kind of annoying because you may be like away from your bag and you're using your phone, you pull up a video or maybe you pull up a call and you won't hear anything and you're wondering why there's no sound. Turns out it's connected to the earbuds, which are slightly like, the case is slightly open, but because of that, it's connected. So, yeah, that's probably the only downside I have with like this whole situation here. I wish the case just had like a better locking system or just a stronger magnet so it stays closed, because this did get a little annoying when I had this like in my bag and it would just open and randomly connect to my phone. Alright, now with all the regular stuff out of the way, how do these guys sound? Honestly, they sound pretty good. They're definitely trying for like some more audiophile-esque kind of like sound quality. They are using beryllium drivers as they are marketing, and I do believe Master Dynamic does do that for their earbuds as well. And that, I'm guessing that's a good thing considering like that Master Dynamic uses it and their earbuds are like $300. These go for like 90, which undercuts them greatly while still giving you a really good sound. The sound itself is marketed to be kind of like balanced, but I don't think it's balanced because everything sounds a bit boosted with a slight, ever so slight warm leaning tone. It's like they tuned it so it's like ever so slightly warm and they were like, wait, let's boost those mids so that we can balance that out. That way it's a little louder but also very present, but also not boring, but also balanced with big old quotes. So it's like balanced-ish, but I do think it is slightly warm leaning. At the low end, it's got a decent amount of bass, has a decent amount of punch, decent amount of rumble. It's got a fair reach into the deep regions, but not like the greatest reach into the sub bass, but still like pretty fairly deep enough where you'd be fairly satisfied with it. I think it does a pretty good job controlling the bass and giving you a good bass presence without letting it get out of control. It's fast, it's strong, and I think most people would enjoy it. A bass head would like be pretty okay with it. Bass heads how they are, they love tons of more bass, but I think they will find it quite adequate. The mid-range was really good on these guys. It was very crisp and clear, and it does feel like they did boost it a bit. Vocals in particular sounded pretty good, which is great in games, especially if you're like playing games and you're communicating with friends. Now, from the upper range, like, the upper mids to the highs, it's also pretty nice and crispy there. It's got a good presence. It's pretty forward, I think. Not like pretty forward, but kind of forward, but it feels that way, along with like the mids and how they present themselves. A good amount of details there, but not like 100% crazy amount of detail, because it's got limits due to being Bluetooth, and you can kind of tell that they're trying to give you more detail, but at the same time trying not to make it like very analytical. They want to make it very musical and enjoyable, because when things get too detailed, it sometimes gets a little sterile sounding in many occasions with earbuds and headphones. Now, where was I at now? So we're in the high range now. So the highs themselves, they have a pretty good extension. I wouldn't say if they have the highest extension. They get pretty damn high, but they do roll off at the top to make sure it doesn't get like, this too much sibilance. But there were a few times where I did find the sound getting sharp, but it was very rare. So overall, I think it was pretty well done. So, but like I said, when it comes to the whole sound as one unit together, it was balanced-ish. It was very musical sounding with a pretty fair amount of detail. Not like a crazy amount, but a pretty good amount of it as they're trying to present it. So it's like a good mix of both. So I think they are trying to give you like a nice listening experience for music. They're trying to advertise it as like, I guess, studio, but I don't think it's studio because usually it gets more analytical with that, but I guess that's where the little details are. That being said, let's get into like soundstage and imaging. So the soundstage itself, it's about average. It's not like super big, it's not super small, well, I mean, I guess it is small because they are, earbuds still, but considering in its size in the the earbud world, it's like about average. There's definitely a lot more width than there is depth, and the depth behind you isn't the greatest in the world. Depth in front of you is just kind of small, but horizontally from left and right, there was a pretty good amount of room. Imaging wise, it was about average as well. It was pretty okay. Didn't really have much trouble finding where things were when it comes to music. In games, it was it was about okay as well. I had a pretty good idea where things generally were in games, whether it was competitive or non-competitive, but I should mention that due to the fact that these are running on Bluetooth, your mileage is definitely going to vary in terms of like latency, which is a really big thing. Like I can say right now, I would not recommend these for competitive gaming in general. That's just how it goes with like Bluetooth earbuds that don't have like some kind of special low latency like mode at all. I wouldn't really use them for competitive gaming unless you're playing it very casually, because in like cases with like the PC, if you have like a lot of PCs, honestly, it can work with aptX, and the latency is a little bit lower, and with Bluetooth 5.2, the latency is also better as well. So there was like a very slight lag, but as you're playing the game, you kind of don't notice it unless you're playing super competitively. When you're playing less competitive games, there is that latency, but it doesn't bother you nearly as much, and you just kind of get used to it like being there, in which case, when you're used to it being there, you don't even really notice it until you switch back to something that has better latency, of course, something wired. But for more casual settings, I think it's going to do you okay. The sound itself, I wouldn't say is the greatest for competitive shooters, because there's just better options out there. That's just kind of how it is. But if you are going to use them for competitive shooters, and you're going to play them very casually, they can work. You can kind of get a good idea of where people are from a general like sense, but what's going to definitely kill you is the latency, because that split second where things are coming at you a little bit late is that split second where you get killed. But like I said, if you're going to be playing more casual games with them, latency isn't going to bother you nearly as much, because it is fairly small. It is noticeable when you really look for it, but as you're playing the game and you're just going around doing whatever you do, it's not so bad, honestly. And once again, your experience will vary depending on what devices you use. Like if you're playing mobile games, it's definitely going to vary on like optimization, from what I've noticed. Like playing certain games that had more lag, such as on Terraria, but if I was playing games like, interestingly, Dead Cells, the latency wasn't nearly as bad, and it was playable. There was a slight bit of lag, but it wasn't that bad, and it was definitely usable. Playing on the console will also vary. I don't have all the consoles in the world, but for my Nintendo Switch, at least in handheld mode, I found the latency to be okay. It's definitely there, but you get over it pretty quick because it's a casual game. I once again wouldn't play anything too competitive on it, so with Splatoon coming out soon, I'd use something more probably like plugged in, honestly. But yeah, overall, I really did enjoy my experience with the Tinbuds 3, minus the whole like connection stuff when the case opens and it connecting prematurely when I didn't want it to. That's probably one of the main things I would fix, and like something that I wouldn't really fix but would add would be a gaming mode similar to how like SoundPeats implemented a gaming mode where you still got really good sound quality, because considering that we have 6.5 hours and these things already get pretty loud, I wouldn't mind seeing like them adding like a new version where there's a gaming mode, which will of course reduce battery by increasing like bandwidth and whatever, but maybe it'll only drop down to 5 hours and we get like good audio quality and a good gaming experience. Like all things considered, this is supposed to be not for gaming. It's for music. It's for like doing daily life stuff, making calls and whatnot, but definitely mostly for music. And it does that really great. Someone looking for that would have a great time with these, especially if your main focus with the earbuds is sound quality. Now, if you're a gamer though, once again, these weren't meant for gaming. You'd still, you'd probably want to look elsewhere, honestly. But if you were to use these for gaming, it's actually not that bad, as long as you're playing something more casual and you're probably playing more on like PC and like on a Nintendo Switch. I don't know about the other consoles necessarily speaking, because I don't have them. I don't have that much money, guys, come on. But your mileage will definitely vary, but I just know that as a whole, when it comes to more casual games, you're gonna be a bit more okay, especially if you have a device that runs aptX, because that'll give you better sound quality as well as better latency. But well, yeah, that's pretty much all I have for today. So if you do want to buy these guys, I will have a link in the description in case you don't want to purchase from there. I do believe it does give me a kickback to help me run this beautiful little channel that tires me the hell out, if I'm being totally honest, but it's kind of fun and I do it for you guys. So that being said, that's all I got for today. So if this video did help you out with your whole buying decision, like the video, subscribe for more content, notification bell thing down there, of course you want to know when I'm posting next, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys next time.